Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 8th edition of the Product Analytics Sync. We have a full agenda and a full list of attendees. So let's go ahead and get started. Would anyone like to volunteer to review the build board? All right, then I will go ahead and take care of it. Let me share my screen. Let me find my screen. Found it. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Thank you for the thumbs up. All righty. Let's start with design. Our resident designers, is there anything to report here?
All of the screens are more or less done. We've removed, but we've separated out stuff we're going to do now as for the minimum viable products and stuff that we think about doing in future. I need to flesh out the issues that we've broken out a bit more, and we have a bi-weekly with Sam, me, and Jan tomorrow, just to make sure we're all aligned and doing the right things, and hopefully we can start getting these into planning breakdown.
All right, sounds good. Does that cover everything in design then? As far as what's being discussed tomorrow in the bi-weekly? Okay.
Yeah, all of those are sub issues based off that.
All right.
Issue.
Then we've got retrieve project dashboards via GraphQL, which is a planning breakdown. Is there anything we can do here, Max?
That should be in review.
Okay. Well, then let's update that.
Yeah, Rob already reviewed it. It's in maintainer review now. And once that's done and merged, we can go ahead and add more to it. Essentially, at the moment, it just pulls out the name, description, and the grid attributes of a dashboard. And once the maintainer is happy with the general approach we're taking, then we can expand that to the rest of the dashboard schema.
Excellent. Cool. We've got track usage with the new tracker on internal handbook, which is blocked, which I guess could just lend itself into my update here. Production readiness review is still in progress. I'm waiting for, I'm going to ping them again today, IT to provision or purchase a domain name and then provision it on Google Cloud. This is necessary for the security and compliance part where they quite literally want to know where everything's hosted and all that kind of stuff. So I'm waiting on that. Unfortunately, the timing didn't work out with the whole security transition we were making regarding Okta. So I'm going to be pushing on that this week since it seems that we've wrapped that up last week. And then we've got the cube query rendering widget for line chart.
Yeah, so this is still in development. As a first step towards this, we need to update our, I guess, foundation or architecture in order to introduce a visualization as this new reusable concept that can be shared by widgets across multiple dashboards. I've created a draft MR for that. And I've also started working with the dev kit, trying to figure out how to link that up to Cube and get everything working. It's I'm probably gonna have to rely on Rob later today or tomorrow, jump in a call and help me debug what I'm doing wrong. But yeah, making progress.
Great.
I was also hitting a couple of bumps connecting to the dev kit. I'm not sure if you have been into that thread or not, because there were a couple of topics from the URLs and so on. So maybe you also can find the answer there.
Let's just make sure that whatever we figure out, either we update the dev kit or at least update the troubleshooting section for future us.
Yeah. If anything, maybe open a Slack thread specifically with the issue you're encountering, Jan, and we can potentially swarm on an async. Curious what the error is, or if it's related to Tim's issues yesterday.
Well, yeah, we'll do.
Cool. All right. We've got defined version 1 of the user dashboard schema. This one's overdue. I have an agenda point for this. We can either address it now or we can get into it later.
Let's come back to it on the agenda.
Okay. And then we've got 4 issues in review. Add loading state to customizable dashboard as a follow-up. Axel, anything you want to report here?
Yeah, so Gian gave me like a, I have mentioned before that I had some doubts regarding this simple issue. Yeah, and some of them were pointed out by Gian, and thank you. So I'm working. It is in review / on dev as well. So I'm addressing those. But yeah, but it is progressing. And the other one that I have there, the MovCube API proxy feature flag to EE, a super simple one that went to production and came back. So running the pipeline it's taking forever, but it should be also ready today.
Got it. Yeah, first broken master. It's exciting. All right, we've got add support for post requests in our Cube.js library.
Yeah, big thanks to Max for asking the question and making me go back to that. Because I was able to finally figure out a way of making post requests work with Cube. So I'm updating the backend implementation to use post instead of get. And I have a working Cube.js call, which makes use of a custom HTTP transport to allow us to pass the headers we need. I found those through Axios. So Jan and Axel, when we start working on the actual visualization stuff, pulling in Cube, that issue has the exact details, and I can always share with them again when we get to it.
Nice. We don't have to worry about any query length issues. So that's great. We have a bookmark for adding Open API v2 documentation. So then we can see where we ended up after that. Oops, excuse me. So we closed adding the ability to enable or disable product analytics from the admin, a number of screens in the design phase for product analytics configuration details view, API endpoint to save product analytics details. Anything we would like to report
those
here?
are just closed because we're not dealing with those at the minute.
Okay.
They're future issues. So rather than having them hanging around, I just got rid of them until we get to the point where we can actually start doing stuff with them.
All right. We also closed, actually you have 2 issues closed here. So I don't know if you wanted to cover any of these regarding the admin settings.
Oh yeah, those 2 are related to the same piece of work. And yeah, everything's fine. I do have some follow-ups to address. For example, one of them is to add a link with the documentation that Max graciously did. But yeah, mostly small follow-ups, and from local is completely functional now. So
cool. And then lastly, we've closed out the issue for making an internal announcement about dog fooding plans, which had gone out some weeks ago. Anything else you want to add here, Sam?
No, it was posted on Slack and folks read it.
Cool. Yeah, we're getting a little bit more data as well. As a side note on our little extension. Sam reached out to the data team. I think we've got 2 additional people using it currently, and we're at about 200 events, but so far it looks like we're getting a steady stream every day. So that's it's nice to have. I'll work on making that more readily available, but I wanted to gather some feedback on that. So that will wrap up our build board review. And then we can go off into the next point. Sam, if you want to take it.
Yeah, so just wanted to highlight a couple changes and updates to a few issues as well as the roadmap recently. As we're making progress towards getting our dog food release out, the question of what's next and what are we going to be doing afterwards is a good one to ask. And so I've gone through and added some extra detail to the 2 issues that are linked there, as well as some others in our product analytics HQ epic. I'd encourage you to go take a look at them. Really what they're going to be highlighting though, are the next big areas of the product we want to work on are really finishing up the schema-driven dashboarding and widget organization in the product, as well as data export. For a look beyond what is after that, I would encourage you to check out the link to the roadmap deck. This deck is very much in progress, but if you're familiar with what we had in compliance, my end goal is to get a similar sort of work product out of it. But the roadmap slide is up to date at this point in terms of stack ranking. So that should reflect what's coming in the future. That's also reflected on the direction page if you've seen a couple of the MRs that I've worked on the last few days. So would love to have feedback, comments, or thoughts either synchronously or asynchronously on that. And that'll give you a little bit more insight into where we're going after this next set of iteration is done. If there's no comments or questions, Dennis, you have the next one.
Cool. Had a couple of different points. Just wanted to get the group's feedback on. So the first one was the GPC, or the global privacy control signal that browsers are now starting to send, and how our JavaScript SDK responds to it. For those that don't know, do not track was the kind of first iteration of that, and that's something that's configurable through your browser settings. GPC on most browsers, at least, I've encountered on some installations of Chrome and certain privacy-focused browsers like Brave, for example, it's sent by default. For me, I don't know if it's an experiment or not, but on Chrome, for me, the GPC signal is always sent. So I've actually had to use a extension to turn that off for the tracker to work for me. For additional context, GPC, the intent is that you enable that signal when you don't want websites to sell your data or share it beyond themselves, or basically share it with third parties. We have no intention of doing either of those with any of what we're building. So the reason I ask about how we want to respond to GPC is that we are currently disabling the JS SDK as soon as we see that signal. But if it's sent by default and we have people, for example, dogfooding this, there's a little bit of friction there in terms of getting them to disable that signal. So the question then becomes, do we actually listen? Like, are we respecting the signal properly? Because by definition, I don't think we are. Like, or put a different way, I don't know that we need to turn off the SDK when GPC is on. And I think that will also simplify just the JavaScript SDK initializing when we expect it to, because we have no intention of selling data or sharing it beyond ourselves. So just wanted to get the team's feedback on that, if we need to update the JavaScript SDK accordingly.
I'll vocalize what I've said in regards to that. From a front end point of view, the spec only sets true or false, 1 or 0. There's a conscious decision to not make it extensible, so you can't say I don't want you to track me for X, Y, or Z reasons. Which in terms of GPC, there are a few different reasons why people turn them on. It might be because they don't want to be tracked full stop, or it might be because they don't want their data to be sold to third parties, like you suggested, Dennis, or they just don't want their personal data collected, not just any data, just identifiable information, more than just session data. People use pages. So there is a quote. We do have an issue to enable privacy mode on Jitsi by default, which would remove a lot of the identifiable information related to people and replace it with an anonymous ID, more or less, rather than IP address related data. So we could enable that, and if we did that, then I would be happy with just turning off GPC, or having a setting like we were thinking for cookies, just to say, do you want to enable GPC and have it default it off?
Yeah, I think for users of the JS SDK who might have a potential to sell or process data beyond the first party, we should still have that as a configurable option for sure. So my suggestion would be then to default it to off, but obviously provide a control for them to respect that signal in the case that they have that or want that capability to do more with that data. With regards to privacy mode, I think also, yeah, we can make that default too. But I think making it configurable, the GPC signal, and defaulting it to off would be my recommendation. Sam, did you want to vocalize your point?
Well, so in the announcement we made, we did tell people we were going to support GPC as well as DNT from day one. So if we want to change direction on that, we're going to have to recommunicate all of that. Because of that, my suggestion would be that we keep forward with supporting GPC in our internal dogfooding. If we want to make a change to not look at it, we do that in alignment with the customer facing release. Because once we go from pre 1.0 to 1.0, that's our chance to make any sort of breaking changes like this that we would want to without having to realign everyone in the organization. Because what I don't want to have happen is people read the announcement, they said, oh, I'm okay with us internally dogfooding because I use GPC, I'm good. Wait, you took GPC away, now I'm not good. And then that introduces frustration and causes folks to lose trust in us at that point.
Could you elaborate on support or taking out GPC? Because what I've suggested is not to, we're still supporting GPC. We're just treating the signal differently.
Well, so I'll link to the announcement where we said that if you have GPC enabled or DNT enabled, we won't collect any data. Is what you're saying that we will still have the ability where if you send the GPC signal that we won't collect data, or maybe I misunderstood what you said before?
So the announcement says that we will support global privacy control. And what I'm suggesting is I'm not saying we don't support GPC. What I'm saying is that we have to treat the signal differently, because if we go out as is, more than likely the JS SDK will not fire for most users. And based on how the GPC is defined, we are not violating it by enabling the JS SDK while the signal is on for our purposes of dog fooding. So I'm in no way suggesting we stop support for it. It's just the treatment of the behavior of how our SDK works, and altering that.
To be clear, the announcement now is actually more in line with what Sam says. We say it's making it possible to opt out of having data from the internal handbook be collected. So we are saying that we do respect GPC. Which then leads towards turning this into a setting, but defaulting it to on for now until we can make that break and change instead.
Okay. I see that. It's further down now. But I was confused by like stop supporting GPC, because I was in no way suggesting that we stop supporting it. It's just the treatment of the
Sure. I'm probably using the word supporting in a slightly different manner versus that.
Okay. So, or is there any, just to move on, can we say that we'll make it a configurable option, default it to on, and then we'll explore defaulting it to off as we move to a different, like the customer facing release?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And once we get to that 1.0, maybe we even change it to default off, and GitLab Inc. switches it to on for our own purposes and lets customers do their own choice.
We would do the inverse, but yeah, that would
Yeah.
make sense. Okay.
I can create those issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. I also wanted to talk about CORS configurability on GDK, because that's right now is not easy to do, since everything is now done in a different YAML file, and the GitLab YAML config file will get overwritten every time you reconfigure. So I have an MR to add the option of disabling it. We can add additional attributes to instead define the allowed hosts, but I just wanted to get people's thoughts on that so we can make action on that. Just because I know that's somewhat running, that's part of potentially why some dev kit integrations are not working as well as they could be. Just want to get the team's thoughts on that.
Yeah, so vocalizing what I said again, I'm not keen on just disabling CORS, because we're deviating too far from what we have in production at that point. We run into causing ourselves problems because we won't notice CORS issues before they happen. Otherwise, I'd much prefer if we could either set the custom GDK additional hosts in our GDK and add those to our CORS policies. Or alternatively, Snowplow does this, where Snowplow is enabled, it adds the Snowplow host to CORS for the collector, the Snowplow's collector and host name. So I'm wondering if maybe we can use the admin settings that we've got now in the product to add that CORS value. So even when you set it up locally, it should automatically allow you through.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So to be fair, to be clear, I'm not advocating for disabling CORS as like a general practice to do at all. There's just an open item for GDK options to be migrated to this new setting, and just disabling it is a valid setting that it has, and may fit some use cases for different people. But yeah, if we bring over just the allowed host, that's totally fine as well. I feel like that's potentially less effort than the admin settings thing, though I do agree that that's better from a user experience perspective, and would probably also help us out on the .com side of things, maybe. But actually, I don't know if that touches our Cloudflare integration, to be honest.
I don't know. Max might know.
I do not.
Okay, so for the purposes of moving forward with that conversation, I will just alter the merge request to add the allowed hosts as a configurable option.
Thank you.
Anyone else, any thoughts on that one? I'm gonna skip C, just out of time. Wanted to get some feedback on the test data set that I had sent. I know Tim had been playing with that, but I was curious if the rest of the team had time to work with that. The purpose of that data set is to eventually seed our dev kit and have something to work with as far as visualizations are concerned. But I'm curious if the people that are working on visualizations have had, particularly the people working on visualizations, have had time to play with that yet.
No, but this is exactly what I'm actually busy with today. So I'll look further into this async.
Got it. I have a task to automate the process of exporting that and making that available to people. So I just want to figure out how to prioritize it based on how people have been using it to make sure that the process works before I spend time working on that. So I'll hold for that.
We'll definitely
Sounds
check it
good.
out.
Jan, I already CC'd you on the Slack thread where we discussed all the thingies and the problems. The other topic was that as we are not pinning the version of Jitsu at the moment, this means the table columns are changing. Would it work if the dump basically has the column headers in the file? Then it should, if we do the import into ClickHouse again, then it should still work, because I was only able now with the current Jitsu version to import it into a Jitsu_test just so that I was able to see it.
Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced that it's the Jitsu versions that are causing the columns things, because I'm seeing new columns being added to the test cluster right now. It's something completely also unrelated, but Sam and I started to see data come from GitLab.com from both of us in some very rare instances. So there might be a CORS issue there. But when that happened, it started sending a GL user ID column over, which I just haven't investigated. And so I'm wondering if something on the, I don't think JSTK, but the Jitsu tracker is just for some reason adding new columns. And I'd love to understand why that's happening and then how we can then potentially restrict that up from our end. But to answer your question, the intent is to create, like, I export both the table schema as well as the data set. So theoretically, when you load it, so I'll need to tweak the instructions, but basically if you want to load it into your dev kit, you'll just delete the table if your integration has already created one, and then rename the table schema import to match that of whatever project namespace you're integrated with. And then that'll continue to collect data. That'll create additional columns if need to be, but then the data set will be at least allowed to import in so that you can at least run the visualizations against it.
Okay, because I was trying to mix them with my local ones that I can create. But I think if you export the dump with the column names, they should map, because right now it's simply counting through the columns. The dump doesn't have column names on the top.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I can look into that for sure.
That might help, because right now it's just different one on number 5.
Yeah,
so,
it's very old school, I suppose, right now. Yeah.
In general, we've not done any work regarding restricting what Jitsu collects necessarily from the front end. So it might be collecting cookies and stuff and other environmental variables.
It might be what it is, cookies. Yeah.
And on the other end, in terms of Cube, we have a schema, but it's a schema from the proof of concept. We have not narrowed or defined what data Cube's meant to be collecting either yet. So which is fine for the just proof of concept internal handbook work, but before we go live, we really need to sit down and figure out that whole structure. That's going to be fun.
And it'll be an iterative process too. We also want to lean on product intelligence to gain some utilize their wisdom on taxonomy and things like that, and the schema in general.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we can. I took a look at the pseudonymization issue that you created a month ago, Robert, and yeah, it was pretty in line with what we did back on product intelligence. So yeah.
All right. We're running out of time, but I definitely wanted to get to this point. We have an overdue issue regarding the schema one, the version 1 of the schema for dashboards. I believe the major open discussion point is regarding query overrides and where we're going to do a date range. I think there are a number of different perspectives here. Basically the discussion, and I agree, is we should, at least for the MVC, we should pick one or the other. I think it's valid to eventually support both, but I'm also thinking about it from a user perspective and user experience perspective, and also just what is simpler to ship right now for our first iteration. Jan, Rob, Tim, you have a couple points here if you want to vocalize, and then we can try to reach a decision very quickly.
Yeah, I'll quickly vocalize mine, since I guess Rob's comment is my comment. In that I think technically supporting one or the other, the cost is more or less the same. So I think our decision should be on what's the most usable. And then also to say that I totally agree that if we support both completely, there is a middle ground that we can have where we say set A of dashboard we allow and set B of widget configuration we allow. For example, dates are only on a dashboard. That's also explorable. But if we allow dates and stuff like that to override on both, then it becomes complex both technically and as like just building this interface and figuring out how we're going to deliver to users. I think that's something that I think is best avoided for an MVC.
Yeah, I don't think both is a good idea right now.
I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate and pointing out that a very common pattern is to have date range set graphs next to each other so you can see progression over time, if that makes sense, and narrow focus. But I agree we should stick to one. I would probably vote for the dashboard level customization options for now, just because cascading granularity can get complicated even if you start doing value models and stuff like that. So if we start with the most basic, set a dashboard, and then narrow focus in future follow-up work, then gives us time to sort of start to understand what sort of data we are needing to filter by and consider it from a UI point of view.
Yeah, agreed. I think moving from dashboard to widgets is going to be easier than vice versa.
I think so too. And the dashboard ones would be more important. The only thing that came now to my mind is why not rather do, instead of an override model, rather a pass on value, so that we basically have, okay, on the top of the dashboard, we define something, we have a filter, okay, let's call it selected date range. This is simply automatically passed on to all the widgets that are in the dashboard, and the widget itself can then decide where to put it, what to do with it, etc. And the same model then on a widget level, where we can say, okay, a widget can have a specific prop that can then be set basically in the designer, where you can say, okay, I want to have last 90 days because we will definitely need some sort of relative time namings, etc. That is something very common. And then we simply pass that prop on in also again into the widget. And in the widget, we decide where to use this in the query, if at all, etc. So it's not this complex model of override, because then you might also get into the situation, rename something down there, the override comes in and it's not matching anymore and stuff like that. So what do you think about that?
I think that's
that sounds...
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So polite.
I was just going to say, I think that's a good approach as we approach, like, go from dashboard to widget level. I think for the purposes of this MVC, dashboard level, also from a user experience perspective, will be simpler, because I do believe there's value in having both. I consider that more of a power user thing, because I've seen users get confused themselves where they define date ranges at the widget level, update something at the dashboard level, and then I wonder why nothing else is changing below. But I think, yes, defining at the level, passing that information to widgets, and then widgets decide what they do with it, or if they have something defined at their level, then that just, it gets used instead. I think that makes sense when we do decide to support both. But Jan, I don't know if you had any final thoughts before I was going to push for
that's pretty much exactly what I was thinking. I think
okay.
seems good, makes sense. And it's, I think, best kept for a follow-up iteration.
So can we agree then we will go to the dashboard level for now as the first iteration, and we'll expand into widget level v1.1 or how in the next iteration. Awesome. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay. Sam, you had a point I already answered, and it's part of my status update. Production readiness is my focus for today, and unblocking that however I can. Any other final thoughts anyone had before we sign off?
Can we document in an issue or something the concept that Tim's outlined? Because I think it's a good way forward, and I don't want to lose that.
I will write that down right now before my next meeting.
Perfect. Happy to add thoughts also on it.
All right, then thanks everyone for the wonderful discussions. Good to see everyone. Have a good rest of your day, good rest of your week, and take care.
Likewise.
Bye.
Bye-bye.